Today it will be different. Today it will be my very first interview in English. My guest made almost 300 movies on YouTube by now. He's computer scientist, certified ACF coach, and certified dance teacher. He works in the company which was established in 1952, and I bet you dreamt about their products. I think right now every single kid and almost every single adult still dreams about that. We can also say that on average every single person on the planet Earth has 80 pieces of this product. Let's move on and see how the Agile works there. Hello everybody, welcome on the very first interview in English on Agile Labs. Today I have a very special guest who works in the company which product is a dream of everybody. So it is very huge chance that you also had this product and play with it. Today I have the pleasure to talk to Carsten. And hello, Carsten.
Hello.
Thank you very much that you agreed to talk with us and make this interview. At the very start, can you say a little bit about yourself? Where actually, what you actually doing?
Yes. First off, my name is Carsten, as you have already mentioned, right? I see myself as some kind of a janitor, maybe, but my official title is an Agile coach, and I work at the Lego Group. And have been doing so for 8.5 years, I think, something like that. Started as a developer, so my background is as a computer scientist, and then slowly moving into this agile space. Yeah, and I'm based in Denmark, in the best named city, Middelfart, which corresponds quite well with my love for dad jokes also when I facilitate meetings and workshops. So there's always some kind of playful aspect to it. And if I cannot do that where I work right now, then I have no clue where we should be playful, if not there.
So if Lego bricks are associated with Agile, it is because there is various games where it is used. But is there Agile inside Lego Group itself?
I think one of the reasons why Lego bricks are used that much to simulate Agile is because it's a super simple concept with these building blocks that you can easily stack them and you can use them in so many ways. And at least in the Western part of the world, a lot of us are grown up with Lego bricks in some way or another. And I think, to be honest, that the Lego Group is actually pretty well on with Agile and what Agile should be. But again, I have only seen a small fraction of what is happening, but the things I've seen is super cool what people are up to.
So do you play Lego during your workshops in the Lego Group?
I would actually say the best example of facilitation with Lego bricks is the Lego Serious Play, which is not affiliated with the Lego Group anymore. But that toolbox is at least something that a lot of people are inspired to. Again, just back to thinking with your hands, and that is where I really like to have something tangible, something that you can sit with in your hands, whether it's doodling or building something with bricks. So you see in a lot of meeting rooms, for instance, that you have just a bowl of mixed bricks, and that's super easy to just get started and doodle something. So you see people definitely use the products in facilitation for sure.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned already about this fraction of a company itself, but Agile is mostly used in IT, and I am very curious. Actually, is this agility or Agile is only in IT side or IT area of a company, but actually you also mentioned that it is that this agility is pretty well established across the whole company. So how actually it is with this agile way of thinking, agile way of working?
I think agile is not just in IT, it is where it makes sense. So we are not religious about everything has to be agile or everything has to be Scrum. It needs to make sense. So at least to my understanding, right, in the production, they're like world-class champions in Lean, and you can find some really awesome articles out there on how they're running the production, and it's super inspiring. And there's nothing I can teach them. And the same in the product side of things. How they make new Lego products is super amazing, and they might not use the word agile, but I'm pretty sure that there are so much agile thinking behind it, and that just grown like organically. Whereas in IT, which is also my background, you've seen this big agile awakening or tidal wave or whatever we call it, right? And agile is definitely a thing in digital, but again, it's not. It has to be Scrum, or it has to be safe, or it has to be Crystal. It has to make sense. So we are trying to create a language around that using Kinevin to enable and empower people to do what makes sense in your context, because nobody knows other than the experts in the teams, right?
So it is more like common sense agile.
Yes, it's not religious by any means. So if it makes sense, then do it. If it doesn't make sense, then find some way else to get that value or that outcome that you're after.
So do you think then that agile is mindset, or it is just the set of tools which you can use, as you said, based on what is needed at this point in time?
I honestly don't care that much about it. We should, when we work or when I work, I have this mantra: I don't care what I work on, as long as there's something that is asking for it in the other end, right? So as long as a user or somebody is in need of what I'm building, then we can call it agile, we can call it lean. That's not that important to me. Because Lean, for instance, have a lot of nice things with this. How do we minimize waste? And there are just some problems where Lean is just more better suited. But in IT in general, it's just Agile seems to be a good fit because we are in the complex domain. But as soon as we're trying to develop new products, then we are in the chaotic domain, and then or oscillating between complex and chaotic. And there it's just we need to do what makes sense. Test, create a hypothesis, try to falsify it, learn from it, and then rinse, repeat.
Mm-hmm. And we mentioned and we know that the company is big. And if we think about big companies, it means there need to be some scaling. And I have seen a couple of articles or texts that how much SAFe was successful in the Lego group. And I would like to ask you actually, how do you scale at the company?
There were some experiments with SAFe. I was never part of them, so I've not that much inside knowledge about those. But from what I know at the moment, nobody is running SAFe. It's again back to do what makes sense. So of course, some people are inspired by some of the mechanics in SAFe. You will probably also find people doing big room planning and so other similar artifacts. But it's again, decision power and empowerment has been pushed into the value streams to figure out how can they maximize the outcomes that they're driving. And it's not you have to run Scrum or you have to run a specific scaling framework. So scaling is something that the value streams themselves figure out how to do, which is quite nice actually.
So there is no, let's say, SAFe-like or any well-known framework or method of working. It is totally taking something from everywhere, right, and put it together to fit the context. And as you said, what will work for you.
Yes, it's back to the local coaches. So if somebody has a crush on less, then they're probably inspired by less because they have some good experiences with that. If somebody else is inspired by SAFe, then they will be do some safe aspects, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not the organization that I am aware of, at least, is not
Mm-hmm.
geared towards a specific way of scaling. It's what makes sense for you, and then you're tracking your progress against some kind of goals. But besides from that, you're actually pretty free to work how it makes sense for you.
But doesn't it make like that everybody, let's say like this, or maybe not particular team, but areas or a couple of teams, but everybody works in a different way. And when we try to communicate, it shows up that, everybody talks in a little bit different language.
In theory, yes, but at least within the Agile field, we have a pretty awesome both Agile network, but also an awesome product network where good ideas, thoughts, experiments are being shared. So there is some alignment there that helps alleviate some of this cross-value stream collaboration. And the Agile coaches themselves are also doing a lot to coordinate. How do we work together? How can we do this? And it's pretty nice to see that it just organically grows from where it's needed. Because sometimes myself in particular, I like to over-engineer stuff. Mm-hmm. So think of every possible scenario that we can run into, and odds are we will only hit 1% of them, and then we've just put a lot of constraints in place for absolutely no reason, which is just stupid. So I learned from that.
Mm-hmm. And what is you said about how it is working, but what from company perspective, organization perspective, what is the biggest challenge actually with using Agile? Because the company is, it is old. So before Agile times, it also, was doing the business and so on and so on. And right now Agile came. Right, so it is some kind of transformation, I can imagine. So what was the biggest challenge on this way to agility or Agile?
It is fractured, right? So it depends on who you're asking. And from my point of view, one of the big challenges is making sure that everybody is understanding why are we doing this. And my answer is always for the kids, right? It's really nice to see what your building is adding joy to so many end users, kids around the world, right? Whether it is a new Lego set or Lego product, or if it's a digital offering, it's just so nice to see how it can move stuff and how it can impact so many people. And sometimes when you are in IT, you tend to forget it because you might be stuck in some back-end system somewhere. And that's when you then go back, when you facilitate, right, and probably play around with the products or have a set that you can build in the office and to reconnect with it.
Mm-hmm. So what would be your advice to somebody who asks you, Carsten, I would like to scale. You mentioned a little bit what the approach is, but what would be your advice if somebody asks you about how to scale?
Don't.
Okay.
Yeah. So really try to not scale for as long as possible, and only scale when you absolutely have to. So when you have tried out all the tricks in the book, optimizing whatever you can optimize, then look into some kind of scaling and keep it as lightweight as possible. So try to figure out, because it's if you start scale right, then it's probably 1-2 big team that you need to split into two. So figure out how do you split it in a meaningful way, and how do you make sure that people are still connected. Because when we split into 2 teams, we should hopefully free up some capacity. So not everybody needs to know what everybody's doing, but we still need to move forward as one coherent value stream instead of just one team. And that's where communication is super important, and that it doesn't get to become us and them. But really don't scale unless you absolutely need to.
Do you think there is how to you said about this one team, but how to recognize, do I need to absolutely, or still I have some room to make something, as you said, every trick from the book that I don't. So it is like simplify things as much as possible, or
Yes.
something different.
No, keep it as simple as possible. And then when you need to scale, figure out how do we still keep those 2 or 3 or whatever teams tightly aligned, but still not so they will block each other in how they work. So, and that's probably also back to, within IT at least, an architectural question. Have we actually made our architecture? Have we made the system landscape in such a way that we can actually work in parallel, or do we have bottlenecks that we first need to weed out before we can truly scale? And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be microservices, just to be clear, because that has its own set of problems.
When we talk about this architecture, it is pretty often that, especially with a company with long history, these systems are, let's say, old. So it was built with different attitude, different goals in mind, and right now we still need to live with it. So it is something like rebuilt in the new way, or actually how to make that this new world fits to this old architecture, which actually force us to have all these dependencies from the perspective of agile coach who wants to keep stuff simple.
This is where my knowledge probably is coming up a bit short, but the things I worked on was, yes, we had to interface with some old systems, but those old systems actually being modernized at a quite rapid rate, and that enabled us to pull in new ways of working and also new technology where it makes sense, which was super awesome. So we were able to pick our own tech stack. Where do we want to host it? How should we run it and stuff like that? If you build it, you run it. That was the mantra, and that helps a lot. To also back to the build ownership, that we made our own bad decisions on how to structure it, and luckily I'm not doing that anymore. That would be a shame for the people having to maintain it. But the journey that the IT landscape has been on is really amazing seen from the outside. I'm not in IT at the moment, so I can just sit on the sideline and cheer at them because they're making some pretty awesome stuff.
And it is often said that business people and developers must work together daily and through the project, and how to achieve it in reality in a big complex company, and especially where the product is physical one, as you said, as we know, it is the physical one, Lego bricks. And on the other side, you also mentioned this team or people who are sitting somewhere and making backend to whatever this backend is doing. So actually, how does this connection exist actually, or it is too far away from each other actually in reality?
No, I actually think people are pretty good at knowing who are using my product or service, whatever it is, right? And then being close to that. So if you're making a system for a production or a molding machine, then people tend to do Gemba walks and see how is it used. Or if you're doing something for other employees, then you test it with other employees. If you're doing something for end users, for consumers, then you test it with consumers. And that's actually pretty cool to see how much effort goes into also validating if we are on the right track or not, because we are not. So we learn a lot from it.
Do you think it is because this it is pretty specific as a situation at Lego Group, that this is the bricks that actually also there are positive emotion in every people? As you said, I want to make happy kids at the end of the day with whatever we do across the company.
I think it differs, but it's also something. So there is something called the Lego brand framework, which stipulates what are the core values. And I have seen a lot of brand frameworks like that, but I really like that I see the values in play every day. Also with that we need to focus on creativity, quality, caring, and so on. And you see that. So you want to make it a good product. You want to live up to the reputation of the company, right? And you get the chance and the environment where you can actually do it, which is super, super awesome.
Mm-hmm. And in the company, we have these IT teams, or you mentioned other departments, but there are also finance, marketing, and so on and so on. You mentioned about this one goal and one attitude or values. But at the end of the day, I can imagine that even that these values are around, but agile way of thinking still is pretty maybe not unknown, but not so well known, for example, in finance department. So how actual, or marketing and so on. So how to put all these bricks together, and this is a joke, like bricks together in the company, put together in the agile way of thinking, so everybody works and think the same way.
But I don't think everybody has to work and think the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is where Kinevin really becomes a super awesome tool to talk about when is something a complicated problem, when is something a complex problem, and then trying to act accordingly. Mm-hmm. Especially, for instance, with finance, right? There are just some rules and regulations. There are some governing constraints that you just need to be aware of, period. You do not want to have two, let's just say, creative accountants, right? And the same with legal. There are just some hard constraints, governing constraints that we need to, but then we can still put some enabling constraints in the system, right, to help us go in the same way. For instance, the brand framework is one. There's also something called the idea paper that can also be found that helps guide us in what is it that we are trying to achieve, and that works quite well. And there is a team that I used to be part of, which are running. They're called Group Business Agility. So they are interfacing with all parts of the company where there is an appetite to learn more about Agile. And then those people in that team, they are both like super experienced Agile, seasoned Agile people and coaches, but they also have an enormous knowledge of everything. A lot of other ways of working, both within lean and more chaotic product development. So they are super skilled at figuring out. So here we could actually try this experiment and see how that would work. Here we could try this, and then really help people along the way.
Mm-hmm. So how does Agile actually helps teams and individuals?
I think so. If you are in an environment where it makes sense to work Agile, then I think it brings like ownership and this feeling proud of what you're doing, feeling proud that I'm part of this. Agile can help you navigate much faster, right? And gain knowledge, learn new things much faster. That is what we need to do. We need to be faster. We need to learn faster, because that will help us in how we are navigating whatever system we're working in.
But do you think this being faster actually is something what is the focus, let's say like this, or it is so important that you actually mentioned that we need to be faster?
Yep. I think faster is one of the classic things when we're talking about Agile that people always try to put focus on, compared to the classic waterfall way of working. And because we are faster, or whatever we call it, right, we can change direction, we can pivot when we need. And I think that is the value. So that's when I say faster, that is what I like about it. So we can figure out, yeah, that was a dead end, and then we can readjust and figure out how can we then deliver to that outcome that we are after.
You have mentioned that at one of the conferences you came across solution-focused coaching, and it was very important point in your career, in your life. And can you tell more about this?
Yes. So as a developer, I was developing still at that point in time. I was world class in over engineering things. So if I was solving, or if I was implementing something, I would always try to generalize it. So in theory, it could be used for this and that, and so on. In reality, it was rarely needed. So the solution-focused way of coaching and asking questions really helped me focus on, so what are the signs of a positive change? And then from there, backtrack to, so what are the actions I could take to impact or affect just those small changes in the system? And that helped quite a lot. Also, when I facilitated retrospectives, because before that, when we had come up with focus points, action point, whatever we call them, right, it would be quite specific. Go out, do this. But then all of a sudden we changed it to have this change happen. And then it's up to whoever ran with that task to figure out, how do we make that change happen? And again, back to creating ownership, feeling that you are in control and actually owning the solution. It's just so much better. And solution-focused coaching is also sometimes called brief coaching because it doesn't take that long. So a coaching session can be 10, 20 minutes, and you can really start a positive journey and inspire in a positive way, which is super inspiring. And I'm still learning every day, even though I've been on this journey, this path for some years. But it's one of the most important things in my professional journey for sure.
So it is something you would recommend for every Scrum Master and Agile coach to also learn or a little, or at least be aware of and know as a tool.
And maybe one of the most, there are two pretty easy to use techniques. One of them is the miracle question, which is just downright brilliant. So whenever we are having a specific problem that we are looking into as a solution focused coach, I don't like to talk about problem. I would much rather talk about solutions. So if we just imagine that this, whatever we're talking about, is fixed. You go to bed tonight, you sleep, you get a visit from your fairy godmother that fixes the problem like this. You wake up in the morning, but you don't know that you had a visit from your fairy godmother. So you get into the office. How do you notice? What changes do you see? What changes do the team see? What changes do management see that this miracle has happened? And that's quite interesting, because then we're not focusing on what have we done, but just how would we notice, and from there backtracking. So okay, Carsten is saying and acting like this. Okay, what can we do that makes this happen? Okay, super. Let's brainstorm on that, and then we can go around the table to figure out what are the concrete and tangible actions we can do to actually make this happen. And I think that's super nice. Another one is a scaling question, which is also yet another awesome technique. So it's super easy also to get started. It doesn't take a lot of effort. You just need a bit of guidance, and then you're on your way to your first solution-focused questions and coaching, which is super nice.
Can you say what, or it is we don't have time to say what how does it work in?
I can run quickly. So the scaling question is, you start out by defining how would it look, how would it feel when it was not necessarily perfect, but close to, and then you say that's a 10. So you have a scale from 1 to 10. Where would you put yourself right now? And then people think and put it as a 6, for instance, or a 4. To be honest, the number is not really that important. Then you ask them, so you put it as a 5. That means something is working. Can you just write down 3 things that made a 5 instead of a 4? Because then, again, we're getting positive reinforcements. What are the things we actually happy is happening? And then, so imagine that all of a sudden it's a 5.1 instead of 5, or it's a 6. How would you notice that this improvement has happened? How would you notice that it's a 6? Write down 3 signs of this, and then when we have these signs, then we can backtrack and look into, so what are small steps we can do to make those changes happen? And we can do that in teams. We can do it for product visions. We can do it for team goals and so on. And it's just a super versatile. You can also, if you are physically in the room, have people stand. So 10 isn't that in, 1 isn't that in, and then stand accordingly. And you can do it in silence even, so people don't have to share what they're working on, but still getting this physical aspect of moving it's super awesome. And you can have multiple scales and whatnot. So it's quite versatile.
Super, thank you. Fantastic. So you work right now as a coach, so I can imagine not with one separate team. So actually, what your role in Lego Group is? So it is teaching other Scrum Masters of these techniques which you just mentioned, for example?
I often refer to myself as a janitor or gardener. Back to I don't really care that much what I work on, as long as there is a pull for it. So it's both coaching some teams, facilitating some teams, doing some work on program level, doing some inspirational sessions, doing a bit of teaching. Again, back to whatever is needed, wherever I think and other people think that I can add the most value. That's what I'll do.
But I also have heard that actually you don't have a Scrum Masters, right, in
Nope.
Lego Group?
Yes. So
how does it happen?
So some years ago, there were a lot of Scrum Masters in digitals in particular, and then as part of a reorganization, all Scrum Masters were renamed to Agile Coaches because, as I previously also said, we don't want to force people to run Scrum. And even if you have the title of a Scrum Master, it's kind of implied, right, that you run Scrum, but that's not what we want. And one other thing was also, and I myself has fallen into that trap more times than I should, but being a Scrum mom, so I want the best for the team, so I facilitate everything, and there were just some signs that was happening. So trying to move people a bit away, further away from the teams, helping them to also be able to say, oh, it's okay, ask that you need some coaching or some training on. That person can actually help you, or it's solution-focused coaching. Carsten can help you, or whoever, right? And in this way, it opened up another playing field where you can all of a sudden actually use each other and call upon each other much easier compared to being a Scrum Master for one or more teams.
So it is like that there are in the team, one particular team, there is no, let's call it still Scrum Master, but somebody who looks and take care of the process, whatever the process is, or it is more like if there is an issue, go to Agile coach who is actually somewhere in the organization, but not in the team directly.
Again, it depends. So some teams have found out that they like to have a specific person, or maybe they're rotating it. I don't care as long as it works, right? Some are doing it more with pulling in an agile coach when it makes sense. But in theory, the team should be self-running, right? And then they can get this outside-in perspective, which can be quite interesting, right? Because you might have an idea of this is the values that we are valuing, and then but seen from the outside, you might be communicating something different.
So if there are no Scrum Masters, but there are Agile coaches, and there are also people like, let's say, developers who even rotate or are more aware about this Agile stuff. So is there some kind of a Agile community in the Lego Group? So you know, exchange knowledge, experience, or learn each other, or it is like, again, something that doesn't exist?
There is a big Agile community where we are a lot of people meeting up, and there are events. So I've made an event on solution-focused coaching. Some of us got together and made an event on liberating structures. Some made an event on graphical facilitation, and then there are monthly meetups where you just socialize and reflect upon stuff. And then you also will see the value streams have their own more, should we say, focused Agile communities where you might have a theme or whatever, right? So people are also spinning up smaller communities where it makes sense. Again, to figure out, oh, you tried this? Interesting. Maybe we should do that as well, or try it out as well, right? And then it might work. It might also just fail miserably.
So if you take part in recruitment of next new Agile coach, or you see somebody who is the newcomers, how would you actually call or describe a good Agile coach? What does it mean?
I'm luckily not part of recruitment, but for me and also for the people I talk to, a good Agile coach is somebody that knows Agile is not the answer and is pragmatic. Because you can easily get caught up in a lot of really nice theoretical discussions, right? But it just needs to work it needs to work in practice as well, right? And then being inspired is of course super interesting, and being curious about the teams, about the company, about the culture is awesome. And then I would always recommend Agile coaches to be coaches and not just process consultants. So having some coaching knowledge just helps a lot, especially as a newcomer, right? Where you don't know that much.
So you also mentioned that you don't care what actually is in use, but you yourself, do you like Scrum, Kanban? You mentioned Crystal, maybe extreme programming, or actually it is everything in one pot and just mix it and pull out separate things, or you have something like your preferences, let's say like this?
It depends on the team that I'm working with. I sometimes, maybe a bit provocative, describe Scrum as a kiddie bike with supporting wheels. Scrum can be an awesome, like super awesome place to start, but at some point, at least to my experience, you need to make it your own, right, and remove the supporting wheels. And then it might not be Scrum, it might be some hybrid of other ideas, right? But it's at least a good way to start this iterative and incremental way of working, which I think works pretty awesome in a lot of IT cases. Of course, if you're running support, that's not for you. Then you want something with way shorter lead time, right? But for development in general, I think some kind of Scrum-ish approach is quite nice.
Actually, you mentioned something interesting, because about all these teams working in a little bit different way, and this, as you said, from bottom up change. But are there any metrics actually in use? Because at the end of the day, I guess you or somebody on some levels want to know what is going on. So is it like, do you use any metrics, or it is not practical in such a setup?
To be honest, my knowledge is a bit outdated, but I know that you use metrics, and we often track against the OKRs on different levels. So there are some portfolio level OKRs and some project value stream OKRs and so on. And that's how you measure progress, and then how you produce that progress, that is then up to you. So it's not that you have to do this or that, you just have to measure progress in a specific way. That's kind of the governing.
Okay. So we talked about framework, methods, and actually this mix of stuff, but are there any other tools which you know from your experience, hey, it is something very cute, very practical, very useful tool, or a part of this coaching we already mentioned, something which you could recommend to our audience, that guys, have a look at this?
If people are not familiar with liberating structures, I would definitely say liberating structures. It's an awesome toolbox for creating nice facilitation where you cater for both introvert and extrovert. I know it's not really that how it works, right? But it's just an easy way of phrasing it. And it gives you so many different tools. And once you really become familiar with them, then for instance, 1, 2 for all is just super applicable. And a lot of other liberating structures are built upon the same principle. And when you then start to bridge liberating structures and solution-focused coaching, then you get a pretty powerful mixture in how you create these invitations that you use in liberating structures in a solution-focused way. And that's really, 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 really powerful.
And a part of working in Lego Group, you also make your own YouTube channel and produced already almost 300 movies, as I mentioned at the very start. So what is the inspiration, or actually why you want to make this effort to record all these movies and share your experience and knowledge?
So the reason is that I'm quite curious as a person, and I'm using them primarily to pace myself to learn new stuff. So I need to have or create a weekly video, so that requires me to learn at least one new thing every week and try it out. So I, at a later point in time, can create a video about it. So I only share stuff that I have tried out myself, simply because I want to know it well enough to be able to communicate it in a couple of minutes, as I do in these videos. And as an added side effect, it's super nice when you're then mentoring or talking with other agile coaches, right? And you're talking about a specific exercise or liberating structure, whatever it is. There's a good chance that after the session, I can send them a link to the video where I will probably say somewhat the same, so they don't need to remember everything I said. They can also just play it back later in their own time, and then take what they can use and ignore the rest, right?
So at the very end of our conversation, you can hear and read pretty often that, the Scrum is dead, the Agile is dead. And what actually you think is the future of Agile?
I think the problem is that the word Agile itself has become quite watered out. So it can mean anything and everything. And that's also why I deliberately at one point in this conversation said iterative and incremental, because to me, that is very much what we're after. We want to work in an iterative and incremental, probably also risk-driven approach, right? So tackling the riskiest assumption first. I don't think Scrum is dead, and I don't think Agile as a concept is dead. There's simply too much money bound to those two words for them to die. But I think we should be more aware and pay more attention to where does Agile make sense, and then use it accordingly, and where should we pave our own road, and where should we just default back to some kind of waterfall V model, whatever rocks our boat, right? Because there are problems where it just makes sense, and we should not forget that not everything needs to be Agile.
And the very last question, what is your very personal, the most, maybe not loved, but the piece of Agile which you like the most?
The thing I love most about Agile is that it's people-centered. And one of my pet peeves is that we need to make a work life where people can bring their entire self to work. And using Agile, right, we can create an environment where people feel ownership and they can see what difference are we making. If we have a good product manager, product owner that can really sell the product vision, why is the thing we're working on the single most important thing since sliced bread? It gives us a proud feeling. I'm super lucky that I'm working on this, right? And if we have a team where we really feel that we belong, it can be super nice that each other so well in the team, right? That we know, oh, so when I do this, then this will happen. Super. And we can work without maybe even saying that much, but we can also have a team where we just have fun all the time, but still get work done. And that is what I really like about Agile and stable teams, that we can create this place where we can bring our entire self to work and not just have a professional facade.
Super. Carsten, thank you very much that you actually took us into the world of Lego Group, Lego, which we know a lot, because I guess all of us has played with Lego, or actually even right now playing Lego, because right now there are also Lego for adults. So everybody knows it, and it is so, as you said, it is so nice and enjoyable to put things together on any occasion. So thank you very much that you actually describe us and make this story about what actually the Agile is behind the scenes in the Lego Group. So that there is the Agile in there. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for all answers. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
You're welcome.